Hello and welcome back to the Responsible Irresponsible podcast. We have a very special episode today. We have a very special guest, Maria York, with us today. And we're going to be picking her brain and asking her tons of questions about her job and her creative works as an author. So we are here and we're introducing Maria. Say hello to the people.
Hey, Corin, Cliff, everyone. Hello.
So I know Cliff is a book reader and he has tons of questions lined up. So I'll let you go ahead and take the lead here.
I am a certified nerd. Yes, let me have this moment.
So glad to meet another nerd.
So we see. Well, by the way, before we get started, I love your Twitter account. It's very fun. I was looking at that earlier.
I never post on that thing. I tell you,
I was scrolling through some of them. I was like, oh yeah, she's pretty fun. So your Twitter's pretty good. So I see that you are. Of course, and please keep. That's the best. You'll hear on this podcast a lot. We love Twitter. It's the best app. Don't stop.
Well, I only have a rare clever moment, but I can't sustain that, so I don't post too often.
So going off of your creative work, you're an author, and you're currently working on your fourth book, correct?
Yes. I actually had written another entire novel, but it was outside of the genre. And so years ago, there was some expert who advised that as a writer, you should always keep kind of like a slush book, things where you can just throw in whatever nonsense you want to put in for that day, whatever research that you've done that you just can't use. And I would do that as I wrote other novels. And when I got done, I was kind of in a creative downtime between novels. And I pulled up that one and I thought, you know what, this is not too bad. It's pretty cohesive. And I toyed with it a little bit and wrapped it up. And it was just not my genre. So I just shelved it and never did anything with it. So yes, I'm wrapping up the fourth book I will publish.
Okay. Nice. So in the beginning for you, what was it that inspired you to want to start writing and self-publishing books?
I can't remember not writing. It was something that I started doing it when I was very young. I remember even when I was in maybe 10, 11 years old, I started writing short stories. When I was in my teen years, I started writing a lot of poetry. Lots of teenagers get poetic. I don't know how good the poetry is, but so when I was a little bit older than that, I was asked to enter into some of a contest. They had published a lot, I think 3 or 4 of my works in this very small book, and I published them all anonymously. So that was my first taste of success at writing. The editor had reached out to me and asked me if I could use some professional guidance. Well, at the same time, I was realizing that this is not a career that's going to make a lot of money. So I was focused more on how am I going to support myself and support my writing. That just required some thinking and some decisions. Unfortunately, I didn't take him up on his offer then, but I never forgot that. Let's not forget where we can do well.
Yeah. Never forget where you come from.
Yeah. And so, like, when you're in this process of writing a novel, like, what is that process like? What gets you into the zone of I've never written a book, but I would imagine it takes a certain amount of focus and drive to complete one.
Sure, it requires research and a lot of deep thought. When you're, I don't really struggle with a lack of a plot. I have probably the next 5 books already outlined.
Oh wow!
So for me, it's getting time to do the writing. The big part of it, though, is doing the research. behind it. I will have to read sometimes 2 books just to write 2 paragraphs or maybe 3 sentences. So there has to be a good amount of research. It's one of the peculiarities among historical fictions that there is a tremendous amount of research that has to go into the work, and a bit of debate too. Some historical fiction writers are very by the book. They will write only about historical characters that actually existed, and they're very careful about what they put in. I'm not quite there. I find that there's enough written about historical figures that we know that it has its place, and some people absolutely love it. I kind of like to go in between. You take an historical figure or a known historical account, and you weave in completely fictitious characters that interact with a couple of minor historical characters. So I kind of take a little bit middle approach to how I write that. So everybody's different though, but it does require a tremendous energy either way.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, like you just brought it up, the historical fiction genre is so specific.
Yeah, so I have no clue what that is.
That like it's so specific. I mean, I like that it is that, because it's somewhere where you could flourish if you are producing a lot of content in that area. But what made you lean towards going that way?
I think other than my love of language, the love of English and reading, was a love of history. So it's always interested me. And I think with historical fictions, you can classify it as historical as long as it is, I think they cut it off right now at maybe World War II. So, and World War II historical fictions are huge right now. So there's from there all the way back as far as you choose to go. So you've got a broad range of interests there. Some people,
it's just about endless.
Yeah, and in different countries, different events within that country. So there's just a vast amount of information that you can draw from and topics you can deal with.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm assuming you made that decision early on when you decided to start writing novels. This was going to be...
Yeah, I think I was in love with the Victorian era for a long time. Just kind of creepy Gothic novels, maybe. Things that just made you feel a little uncomfortable, a little worried. But ultimately, there was a little bit of mystery, a little bit of suspense. So I think they always fascinated me. And I knew that I would probably just naturally write in historical novels because it just interested me so much more.
Gotcha.
And two, they take you away from your everyday life. I mean, for what I do for a living, I have to read court orders and police affidavits and read about terrible things that happened in everyday life. So terrible things happened long, long ago, but it removes you a little bit from the everyday.
For sure. And I think as I've started to read more now, I appreciate that. Now, I just started reading maybe a couple of years ago, and I think I took that for granted. It's like, if you really submerge yourself into a book, it is a good way to wind down, to enter another world, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
When I step away from work and even from my writing, I find that I'm reading like fantasies and sci-fis, things that are even far removed from actual reality. So that's my little getaway.
Yeah, I haven't reached that stage of maturity yet to become a reader. I just don't have, I guess it's an excuse, but I feel like I don't have the patience for books. I never had in school. I basically read the books that I absolutely had to, and that was it. But as of recently, I have found the value in research and researching just any topic, whatever it is, whether it be drama or whether it be, something that's going on in real life. I have found, that the value of sitting down and really picking apart a certain subject or a certain event that happened. So, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting there or not, but I don't foresee myself becoming a book reader anytime soon.
Yeah,
in due time.
Most people are not readers, so that's not that you're definitely not alone in that. And I think that's probably what's created a huge surge in audiobooks as well. Mm-hmm. Just that it's something that you can do. You can just listen while you drive, or listen while you're doing your chores or errands. So that's not that uncommon. But the good thing is that you are researching facts, and from there, that's honestly where I draw a tremendous, imagination. Try to figure out if I might, for example, in this next book, when I finish this book that I'm writing, there's another one that comes after in the series, and I'm trying to tie in certain historical events that actually took place in a specific area. So I will try to look for common threads, and in my own way, I'll weave them together with his character, so that this character is bumping into actual events. So gathering facts can actually create creative environment. For example, when you say to yourself, well, we know that this happened and we know that happened. What happens in between, right? And isn't that where everybody has a ton of stories? Everybody will suppose, well, I think that this conspiracy happened, or I think that, so lots of imaginings are born out of the gap between
never
factors.
thought of it that way.
I've never thought about that way either.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's crazy.
That
makes so much sense.
It's basically all the things that were never written down that we don't know, so it's just left to our imagination.
Right. And it happens in our own lives too. I mean, if you picked out, let's say you think about the most embarrassing, the worst decision you've ever made that you just would never want anyone, then put that as a headline. Can you imagine on Twitter, on Facebook, the comments that you would get? But how many of them would be accurate? And yet people are certain. They create this echo chamber on social media about how certain they are that this is what happened. There's a whole storyline behind why you made that decision. And you might know it's a bad decision, but you have to stand by it, because when the chips were down, that was like the best of all the terrible options that you had.
Oof. Yeah. That opens a whole can of worms with the internet. I mean, we see that daily on Twitter, and just, on any story, really, people fabricating their realities. And it comes down to the point where the actual story from the person doesn't matter. It's whoever has the best story, everyone goes with that. And then it's just a mob mentality of people. Yep, I agree with that. So that's what it's going to be.
So essentially, we are all creating stories every day anyways. Yeah. We're just not writing them down.
And we can create stories that entertain us. We can create stories that actually irritate us. And we do that every day too. And we think about, you will drive to work, for example, and there's a person in front of you, and you are sure that they are deliberately going slow just to irritate you. But that's the story we tell ourselves. In reality, that could be a completely different scenario. We could just as easily tell ourselves a story that calms us down and makes us passionate. So we could tell ourselves, here's a very old man, and he's driving so slowly because he's taking his little old wife home from the hospital, and every bump hurts her. And so he has to be so careful because he loves her so much. So the stories we tell ourselves can engender compassion or infuriate us. and others.
Wow, you're really good. You're really good at this.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Because like now I feel something now. Like you're really good at this.
Yeah, and I never really thought about that because I would have considered myself a very angry person in my younger years, and especially with driving. And I've only had to be driving to work for a longer period of time for a year and a half now. And I don't know if you know, driving on I-4 could be very stressful. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you just said, imagining a scenario where you can calm yourself down instead of infuriate yourself, and like basically make excuses for that person in your own head. So it invokes a positive emotion, not a negative one.
I feel like we need to practice that a lot more.
Yes.
Like I'm very aware of that now, but I never had the words to explain it, and you just did it in 5 minutes. Like, that's crazy.
It definitely takes practice to change those kind of ingrained personality quirks that we have. But we can train ourselves to think differently, think more positive. Just change the story that we tell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I will say this, one of the main points of this podcast is to, preach positivity. And from the beginning, we have both, said that positivity brings so much better results to everything in our lives instead of negative ones. And
yes.
The hard part is that that's just not what's pushed. So you got to search out for it, or just try telling better stories.
Yeah.
I've loved that about your podcast. Just listening to the episodes, that is your focus, and bringing that to the table is a huge factor in changing the way people think, just slowly, one person at a time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
There's another podcast called Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, and they focus a lot on how to develop a positive work environment. And that reminds me a lot of yours. Just in everyday life, are we being positive? How do we avoid the negative? How do we deal with that cancel culture? Is it possible to just scroll past things that we know are going to irritate us? Why do we gravitate toward the things that we know will inflame that frustration? Do we always have to speak our mind about any and every issue, when in all reality, how much do we really know about what's actually going on with that issue?
Man, I'm sorry, but that brings such joy to me that what I feel like what I'm trying to push in our podcast, and what I feel like we're both trying to push, is actually, what we're doing. And to hear it coming from you, that's really, it warms my heart.
Yeah,
so
it does mean
thank
a
you.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Thank you guys. You guys have a platform and you're using it beautifully.
Thank you.
Hey. So, yeah. Woo. Wow. Okay. Maria, you're killing it. So I wanted to ask one more question too about the books. So you did say in the beginning that you had completed another book that was of a different genre. Are there any other genres that you could see yourself maybe in the future, maybe trying out, or that you're interested in?
One day when I was just trying to get my mind off of everything, I came up with a kind of a fantasy plot that was about a few different alien races. I will never write that book. But I really fell in love with the idea. And then I've had a couple of people who've reached out to me on a very different type of plot. They basically had some characters and they wanted a plot that could string together. So they described these different unique characters and asked me to kind of weave them together in a plot. So I would hope that one day they might give me a call back and collaborate on it, because that sticks in my mind too. That was more of robots and mechanics, and there's a beautiful name for it, and it always escapes my mind. But it's kind of, it has some machinery and some history.
Are you talking about cyberpunk?
Yeah,
it's a cyberpunk.
Yeah, steampunk.
Steampunk. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't know why that never stuck. It's fascinating.
That's a whole culture in itself.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, especially I've gone, not to go completely off topic, but a lot of like gaming conventions, that's a whole like subgenre of people that are just interested in the steampunk or cyberpunk like reality or, stories, which it's so interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they link a little bit with historical fiction. So you'll get elements of, it reminds me a little bit of Doctor Who. He goes back to like Victorian England. So that one weaves well into my mind because it's close enough to what historically could have happened, but then you're bringing in these really bizarre elements that make you wonder, well, what is happening? What is this person doing? It makes you wonder a little bit more about their motives. So I find it fascinating. There have been some good books that I've read that are of that genre as well. Saving Verity is an interesting one.
Okay. It's a very interesting genre. I had to ask you one question though. Hamilton, are you a fan?
Don't kill me. Do not kill me. I have not seen it at all.
Don't be ashamed. Do not be ashamed.
Yeah, don't be ashamed.
I haven't either.
Okay.
I will say though, I am not. I'm not a history person at all. I'm pretty sure I failed my way through school in history, but I do love music, and Hamilton is a musical, as I'm pretty sure everyone's aware now. But I do suggest watching it because knowing that you are very interested in history, from what my wife has said, I haven't done my own research, but from what she has done, because she's a big fan too, it is historically accurate. I like the story that's told in the play. It's historically accurate. So I do suggest checking it out because it is a very...
It's got rave reviews.
Yes.
They've been trying to convince me to watch it for some time now. So
I think that if you can have a very lame plot, but if it has a great musical score, it really sells. I think about Phantom of the Opera. When I pull that plot apart, I just, it's exhausting. There's a crazy man and there's a woman who gets in some weird relationship with him, but he's super crazy and he kills people. And I mean, that's a nuts plot. But the musical score is gorgeous, and you just fall in love with the music. You fall in love with this murderer with no nose, by the way.
Yep.
And it's just ridiculous, but the music is so beautiful. And meanwhile,
isn't it funny how two elements can do that? Two separate elements, when combined and executed properly, can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Genius. That's genius, right? Two strange things put together.
But I know we haven't gotten into it, and you kind of mentioned it a little bit about your secular job. So what do you do for work? And is it something that you went to school for? Is it something that kind of just happened?
So I'm a forensic coordinator. I work at a psychology practice, but I communicate with the courts, with attorneys, and judges. Judges are, they are very, they oversee everything. So you try not to bring them in too much for what you accomplish in specific situations. But I have to read a lot of court orders and police affidavits, and then I communicate with the attorneys about there are two main pieces to it. There's a criminal piece, which is pretty straightforward. The psychologists and neuropsychologists do competency evaluations where they basically determine, is this person mentally fit and able enough to go to court and participate in his defense? Does he understand the charges against him? A big misconception about that is that if a person is deemed incompetent, that doesn't mean he gets to go off free. What typically happens is they have competency training. They have to learn, what these charges are, what the penalties are, get mentally fit enough, whether it's through medication, substance abuse treatment, etc., so that they're able to participate in their own defense.
Okay.
If they fail for long enough, then the charges can get dismissed, but that's pretty rare, and there are a lot of other things that happen. Then there are also kind of if someone is a very separatively evaluated, if they're not guilty by insanity. So then you have to pick apart if that person at the time of the offense was criminally insane, and it's very difficult to prove. I recently ran into a statistic that said, well, I don't remember it, but it's just a very, very challenging way to win a case. But that said, we have run into many cases where the defendant absolutely was out of their mind. They were absolutely impaired, not by substances, though a lot of times using substances for a long period of time can create schizophrenia and create problems like that. So if they weren't, that's where I think jurors have a difficult time. There's a really interesting book by a forensic psychologist. He wrote it in the 90s, I want to say. And the defendant was accused of something very terrible. He had just been absolutely in love with this woman who showed no evidence of loving him in return. And in his mind, he had just thought that they should be together. And he never assaulted her physically until one day he wanted to kill himself. Instead, he ran his car into hers while it was parked, threw acid on her, and she died. So this man suffered with tremendous mental health issues. I know, it's terrible. I probably said that very cavalierly because this is stuff that I encounter at work.
You do this a lot. I understand.
But what's interesting is that both the state and the defense attorneys agreed that the defendant was criminally insane. So they present it to the jury. The jury says, no, we're not buying it. We think he is. So what the defendant then said was, thank you for declaring me sane. You agree that basically he took that their finding of him being sane is that he was doing the right thing.
Oh, wow.
His perception.
Oh.
So when we think about the power a jury has in the case, a lot of people remember Casey Anthony, was it? With the little girl?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the mother. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that there definitely is a fallibility, a jury of your peers. However, here we are with this unique court system that, for better or for worse, here we are. So the criminal piece is one side. The other side is the family law. So when families go through divorce, the children who are involved, sometimes there will be concerns. Are they safe with this? And the court, unless they see that there is an actual danger, the court will usually grant shared custody of that child. So occasionally, because of substance abuse or mental health issues, they will order that one parent or even both parents go through an evaluation to determine if they are safe.
Mm-hmm. And actually,
I feel like this is very straining. Are you stressed a lot at work?
No, I actually really like what I do. I really like it.
Okay. Are you able to separate like your work thoughts and your work life from, when you get home and you're kind of either writing or just living your normal day life?
What sticks with me more than cases are probably more like office politics stuff. That is actually a little harder to shake off than what I read in what I have, for what has to be done for reports. In fact, a lot of times it will, with all of the really difficult cases that I've read, I've been doing this for almost 50. The really terrible details of a case, they really don't come to mind unless there's a topic that comes up and it reminds me of this case.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not too difficult at all. In fact, I think in a lot of ways, whatever you do for a living should help you to inform your creative process.
Yeah.
So, for example, you're not pulling a person that you know into plot. You're not bringing in something bad that happened in your life or something bad that you've read about into the plot. But it certainly helps you get that person's perspective. So you can look at a criminal or you can look at character that you're writing and think to yourself, look, for example, when we think about what's kind of popular in women's writing these days, unfortunately, is taking the bad boy and making him really bad. Just angry, abusive, terrible man. And then one day she just says, I love you in a particular way. And suddenly that is just not reality. So I have a deep aversion to that lazy writing style.
Okay.
So when I'm writing an interaction with characters, you're not just writing this cardboard box description that you have for what you feel this character. You have to consider, why are they doing this? Even if it's a secondary, what are their motivations? Because if you're writing something that doesn't feel true, the audience will.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. So that comes with that, you're having to directly evaluate someone's psyche. Is that correct?
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. I coordinate between the courts and the psychologist.
Okay.
So I'm not the one evaluating. Okay. So I do everything so that the psychologist goes out, evaluates, and then they usually provide the report back to me to make sure that it's proofread, or even side do psychometric testing, HD or learning disabilities, autism testing, that it makes sense. It's proofed for any errors that I catch. So that's the paper side of it. I do a lot.
Gotcha.
So.
All right. So I bet you.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I bet you read some very interesting papers written by psychologists.
That's one of the most beautiful things I appreciate about what I do, is that I get to work with people who are so much smarter than I work with 2 very brilliant neuropsychologists and 1 very brilliant psychologist. And it's amazing how much knowledge they can pour out if prompted. But when you're dealing with them in everyday life, they're just beautiful humans.
Yeah.
and how much you can learn from their patience, from the way they deal with things. And I think one of the most wonderful things that I've come to appreciate is the ability to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like that has become a lost art. Everybody has to know. Everybody has to.
Yep. Or everyone thinks
conviction.
They know.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Speaking with that conviction. And when you work with people who have all of these facts at their fingertips, right in their minds, it is amazing how that knowledge, now it doesn't always have to work that way, spoken with some psychologists, not at our practice, fortunately, but who are just going through life but first. But there's just such a beauty to the ability of saying, let's see what we can find out about this. Or, after all of this, sometimes we just don't know what the situation is. Yeah. So I think that's one of the benefits too, with all that knowledge, applied wisdom, still have that humility. It's something to.
For sure. Yeah, we have been as of recently. I mean, we kind of have the whole time, but as of recently, really pushing taking care of your mental health, especially with this pandemic. Everyone's inside, and some people, do have certain problems that other people do with anxiety and like dealing with certain situations differently. And, there's some people inside that are literally going crazy, stuck in their own head. So I have been pushing a lot of keeping your mental health in check and going to get help if you need it. And go ahead.
Yes. No, for sure. It's very important.
Yeah. In fact, years ago, I first started in this field. A psychologist who has more recently moved away, had said that when a person actually begins to need mental assistance, and when they actually make that very first to reach, it's about 18 months to 2 years.
Oh. Wow.
So that tells you a couple of things. It was told to me because it's important to know how supportive you need to be when someone is reaching for assistance. And for my purposes, it was never leaving a person not knowing what they need next. What is the next step? So even if it's just, are you providing them a resource for some place where they can get, substance abuse assistance? Because that's something we hadn't done until recently, in a substance abuse counselor. So if there's something that we can't do for one reason or maybe they have Medicaid and they don't know where to go because no one's taking insurance, we can provide that information. Local, Peace River, or I'm in Sweet Center. Mm-hmm. Or if someone is looking for help for an elderly person, where can they go? So just not leaving them without a resource because it's taken them that long. That always impressed me, that even if I don't know, can I give them someone who might?
Yeah. Wow. A listening ear, basically.
I never even thought about that. That is very interesting. And I understand the severity of that. That's wow.
And social issues are so interconnected with mental health issues. So you might see, for example, someone who is homeless on the street. Mm-hmm. In our simplistic mind, we might think to ourselves, well, all he needs is a home. All he needs is a job. But so many times that's So they'll have mental health as behavior. They're young. They don't do well in school, so to substance abuse in school. They drop out of school or they just get addicted. Family is overwhelmed by challenges that person's decisions and behaviors have presented. So what happens? They wind up being homeless. And they are homeless. Mm-hmm. They get arrested for trespassing or possession. And they wind up in jail. And then for a simple charge. And then it costs taxpayers thousands and thousands of dollars through all of the necessary evaluations and court dates and treatments. So these social issues are deeply health. We bring in, here are police who are trained to, keep the peace or whatever. And here they're confronted with a situation that, they're not psychologists. They're not trained to know, is this person actually a danger or can we talk? Is he more likely to implode or is he more likely to explode? Is it, would a substance abuse person be more beneficial in this situation? And it just creates it's a burning platform. And hopefully, to create any change, isn't that we need a burning platform to create? So
absolutely.
Actually, it's such a deep issue.
It's kind of interesting too how, because as the analysis that you just did there, it's kind of funny how that fits into what you were telling us earlier about when we make that initial judgment of a person that we might see on the street or anyone for that matter. It's always about the story we tell ourselves first. And then it's funny how that is what gets the ball rolling of how we would then make our next decision and how we would respond to that person.
We used to work with DCF and lose a child to the system. They would have opportunities to do certain steps in order for the child to get off of drugs, take out your abusive partner, clean your house, get a job, do parent training, all of these things. And so when there were certain simple steps along the way that do you think to yourself, well, if it's this simple to help this person go from A to B, why is this not? So when I first started to figure out, well, what can we do to help these organizations? I was running into, well, in order to fix this, you have to fix this bigger issue that is a cog that we can't get to, they would say. So you reach out to that person and they say, that is great. But in order to accomplish that, you need to reach out to this organization because that's who actually decides who does this. And it is just it's a structure within a structure within a structure. And to break it all down, you'd almost have to derail the entire system and build it from the ground up. And when we worry about what falls between the cracks right now, and we think about the whole structure collapsing, it creates a tremendous amount of concern for to so many people, this huge demographic of people who lose all of those supports for as long as it takes to get that system. And will it work any better? Because we are flawed as humans and we create flawed systems. We do our best with the data that, but there's always room for it. Certainly, we need to change many things, but can we do it? Is always who are the experts that make those changes, and are they listening to those experts? Because we've got so much data on everything, including, the consequences of not mask. What's happening? Why are the oceans warming? I mean, we have tons of data on what is actually causing this, but instead of reading the data, we'll read a blurb about the data, thousands about it.
Wow.
Oh, all facts.
Yeah. I mean, back to what you said about creating that, when you're creating a structure and making sure that structure is supported so that it doesn't get to the point where it all falls apart. That's, to me, so important.
And how can we find happiness in the midst of all of that when we think about there are always going to be a group of people who demand their rights, and there are always going to be a group of people that are angry that those people are not acting within the realm of responsibility. But in order to really be content, we have to look at what is the reality. The reality is that it's kind of like driving a car. When you get in your car, you want as many safeguards as you can, because you know you may follow rules, but one moment of your inattention, one moment of someone else's inattention, or one moment where you encounter someone who is disregarding every rule, driving drunk, going the wrong way, they can cause catastrophic consequences. So we have to live within, and it makes you a lot less frustrated with those who are in, a group of people that you just cannot. The reality is we'll always have. How do we find our peace of mind instead of losing our minds when we're frustrated with that logic, whatever that logic is?
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, you explained everything so well. No wonder you're a writer. You're so good at this.
Thank you. But you ask a lot of questions, Cora, and I didn't mean to ignore your question about, training for different jobs. And I know that you've asked that question a lot, and I'm curious about it. So what is it that makes you ask about what a person needs to do their job? Because I'll tell you honestly, from just overtly, I do not need a degree for what I do, because I don't give legal advice. I'm not the psychologist, so I don't do therapy. So overtly, I do not. That said, you've got to have certain ability to do this job. But I'm curious about what prompts you to, is it, how to find happiness in your job, or what type of job makes you happy? Or
no, I think I'm a very strong believer in the fact that whatever you go to school for, whether you go to school for something or you don't go to school for something, that shouldn't be the end as far as learning. And if there's something that you find that you love to do and that interests you, also, going back to a structured school like platform is not for everyone. For some people, that's the best way to learn. Some people, they don't. I know me personally, and I've talked about this on the podcast, that a lot of the stuff I've done for secular jobs, I've been kind of thrown into it, and I've learned on the job, and I've learned with my hands and with people, teaching me. I don't know if this is this the question? Am I answering the question you asked? I don't know.
I think so.
Okay.
So there's absolutely, when you consider what, so let's say, for example, a person their family, parents encourage, go be a lawyer, go be a doctor, go be whatever. I'm sure that you both have encountered people who, although that is their degree, that is their profession, and they do it, they might do it very badly. You might have a bad attorney, a bad doctor. So just because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's a whole, besides our personal abilities, I mean, they might have been, better suited to be a chef or, statistician or something. So there's this whole, you can even look it up. There's a gentleman, it's called the 10,000. And
by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah. So he writes that, if you're, it's kind of like the idea of you're able to become proficient at some, after about 10,000 hours, you will meet your personal max ability. And I think he was the example of golfing. Is that what you remember, Cliff?
Oh, he used a few of them. It was, I think, golfing, hockey, musicians, piano, composers. Like he would basically put you into a category. Like if you were, let's say you did 10,000 hours of a sport, then you probably qualify for a professional level. If it was, I don't know, 5,000 to 8,000, maybe a coach, or anything lower than that would be like a PE teacher. But so he had different categories and scales for each.
Right. And when you intersect a personal ability, so for example, no matter how many times I could spend 10,000 hours hitting a golf ball, I have zero motivation to do that. So you give me 10,000 hours to hit that golf ball, my skill level will reach its max. So I think that's a beautiful thing, that even though we have personal limitations, whether it's because of do we have an athletic body, or do we have a mind that absorbs a whole bunch of facts and is able to fall into a state of deep thinking, or are we, we have to go, we've got to put things together, we understand mechanics of things, and there are different abilities that we all have. Can we figure out a way to harness those abilities, and does it require us to, can we find some type of a mentorship where we can learn on the job and graduate within the organization to reach our abilities? Absolutely. I think that's the fascinating thing, even when you look at these extremely intelligent people who work in tech, at Google, at Twitter, they will, I think it was not too long ago, I was reading in 2017, I read about a Peruvian chef, and he actually, I think it was at Twitter, that he worked at Twitter, and he had a very complicated job, but he just wanted to be a chef. And so he was in London, and he has this 5-star restaurant in London. No, he never went to school to be a chef. He just did what he loved.
Just wanted to do it.
Yeah. So I am a big proponent for however you get there, as long as you're happy when you get there.
Yeah, I agree with 100%.
I agree 100% too. And I also agree that everyone is capable. And back to the point of basically practice makes perfect. If you find something that interests you and that you love to do, then by all means, go do that. Go learn how to do that to the best of your ability. And then in most cases, that love for that thing could possibly, become a job, or maybe you don't want it to become a job. Maybe you just want it to be a hobby. Right. But yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the internet too. And being able to talk to people from around the world with so many different backgrounds and professions, and what they're passionate about, is the fact of there's so much like knowledge out there to be learned. And if you are interested in something, then it's like, right there you have the resources to do so. So I mean,
which is by far my favorite part of living in the future, in 2020, and living in the present, I should say.
Yes.
Anything you want to learn, you can learn. And
to think that there is still so much that we can build on it. Everything that is in our hands now has begun with the generation behind us. So right now, for example, we are in love with all the social media, with all of this connectivity. It connects the whole globe for work, for intellectual purposes, for whatever pursuits you want. But interestingly, the workplace hasn't caught up with that. So productivity has not increased alongside development. So we that's probably going to be the next generation job, is to make that work environment a little bit more sensible for all of the tech we have, so that you're not going to answer 300 emails that can diminish your productivity. So there are huge leaps and bounds that we have taken and that will take. And that's, I think, another part of how you're reading heuristic. That's the beauty of it. How much we got to draw from what we saw in, Star Trek, or what we saw in what lots of people saw Back to the Future and said, hey, why don't we have the flying cars? And
playing off of people's strengths too. I mean, absolutely. Like in like you said, in the workplace, some person that's sitting there writing papers and reading emails may not be as efficient as the person that's told to make the website that they're reading the emails from. So I agree in the fact that, like, I hope we come to a point where it's not such a like scary thing, or like a the word I'm looking for, such an odd thing to play off people's strengths in the workplace, even though they're not technically have that certificate, or if they're formally trained in that field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a famous architect who he has a really interesting philosophy. Creates all these avant-garde pieces, buildings, and even a panda enclosure recently. I mean, he's done all kinds of interesting things, but he says that within his organization, it's logical that you start in one position, and then you do well, so you get promoted, and that person will get promoted until they kind of reach their max, and you don't demote them, but then they're stuck in this job that they're not happy with because it's a little bit either beyond their potential, or they're just dead bored with it. Yeah. So he said that what he likes to do is take someone who he originally hired for one purpose. He sees their potential in a completely different arena. So let's say he hires another, and he doesn't do that great of a job as an architect, but he's brilliant at, coordinating with different members of the public or different organizations, and he gets work done. So instead of keeping him in a job where he does passable work and he's moderately unhappy, he gets to do something that he's actually good at because he's used for his skills, not for what necessarily even what he was hired for.
Yeah, there's a lot of lost potential in a lot of people, I think. And then the fact that whoever maybe is their employer doesn't give them the light of day, so to speak, to even try to do something else, it just puts unnecessary sense of failure to these people that, like this architect, that person, he could have very well just fired that person and got a new person, but instead he realized that person's strength and used them for something else. And that no doubt boosted that person's confidence in themselves, instead of just firing them and, saying they're a trash architect.
I think we're going to see more of that. Yeah. Like in the coming generations, because of the social media platforms and the forums and just things that you can use through self-education. Just like you're talking about, at the end of the day, of course, it's nice to have your degree, but it's just a piece of paper. And all, I have one too. It's just a piece of paper. Through self-education and through practice, and then hopefully by finding someone who can help you leverage your skills and the things that you're personally really good at, that's how opportunities are really created and things are taken advantage of. And I think most people are catching on to that. So hopefully that makes for better work environments and for better companies.
Right. And when you're good at what you do, and when people sense that you care about them, they're not necessarily going to say, well, where did you go to school, and what did you learn there? Sometimes people can have these lovely degrees and just nobody that you'd want to work. Their personalities just, they tank the whole process. So absolutely, just making people content can actually, or at least helping them in some way, can just speak volumes about you as a person and help them more than, any attitude that you might get could. So absolutely, just making sure that you're happy in what you do, and even what you guys are doing with your podcast, you're sharing, encouraging, bring some positive, and getting people to focus on something that can help them to become happier people, despite all of the social media distractions that can weigh them down, make them feel like they engage in some negativity.
For sure.
This stuff just creates such a challenging for them. So you guys create a totally different structure for them. Listen to something good.
Yeah. That's what we're here for.
And so Maria, being the fact that you've leveraged yourself and your personal abilities to start writing and create things for people to read that they also enjoy, what tips would you give to someone who might also have the urge to start writing or self-publish their books? What other tips would you give to them that they want to start doing that?
Read a lot in the genre you plan to write, because you will need to know what you don't like about that genre and what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say go to your local library. A lot of times librarians will know where writers groups are. It helps to join a writers group that fits where you are as a writer. So sometimes a person will be in this process of, I feel like I have a story. I don't know how to write it. I don't know how to begin it. You can read a lot of books about, you can go take creative writing classes. But if you're just not sure, if you just have that novel inside of you and you want to write it, just go to these free writers classes that they have at the library or in your neighborhood, somewhere in your city. Most cities have a few of them, and you can kind of bounce ideas off of others. You can read each other's manuscripts.
Okay.
But always educate yourself. Find out, if you are writing on a topic, make sure that you're doing research on it, so that way you're able to communicate that in an effective way. And the more you read, the more you'll see how to write. Where do you put paragraphs? So, where do you, when you're writing quotation marks, where do you put that period? And it's those little things that, even though they may seem like a minutia, those are the technicalities that can cost you readers.
For sure.
You can rely on your spell check, but are you using your? Do you have a thesaurus to find a better word? Are you repeating certain phrases again and again? Having people read what you write, beta readers, or even people you can bounce ideas off of, are so helpful in that process. Publishing is a very expensive endeavor. Every step of the way, you are putting not just yourself out there, but you're putting money out there. You've got to pay for an editor. The editor can be just like a proofreader, or they can be a content. Costs money. You pay for your cover art. You pay for, they're just so you pay different people to accomplish different things. And then along the way, everybody gets their cut. So your agent will get a cut, your publisher will get a cut. And what you actually make is very small. So don't get into it for the money.
Yeah,
for sure.
Get a job so that you're not, I follow a lot of other authors on Twitter, and they all say, how do I sell my books? And the joke is that you have to die, because most people are posthumously famous.
Man.
That's
dark.
That's dark.
It's dark, but it's true. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
especially in the music world right now. I feel like a lot of these very, very talented people that have tragically passed away weren't acknowledged until they were actually gone. And now these people are actually realizing their talent, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, that's true. What was the guy? There was a guy who wrote this song, and then XXX Tentacion sang it, and
you pronounced it right. Like, oh my goodness, who are you?
I am too old and too white, but to get much right. But he died, and I just thought, this is so sad that.
I feel like his death affected me a lot because when he did start out, he was starting out very edgy and very rough, I feel like. And then around the time of his death, I mean, he was completely changing around his whole platform, and he was turning to a side of positivity. And the tragic way he passed away it was sad to see, for sure. There's much unused potential there.
Yeah, that is a very sad part of when any artist passes away, no matter what they're creating. The evolution of artists is usually one of the better things to see how they change as they age, as their perspective changes. And lately, we've been getting robbed of that a lot. It's been unfortunate to see a lot of young artists and creators passing away. But
we get to, at least their work became known because of that. If there's anything that a person can leave, how beautiful it is, have it remembered. Their words, their songs, their lyrics, they left a piece of their soul. They're who they truly are, how they saw the world. Even I think that's maybe why it becomes even more tragic, because you only got a glimpse, and by the time you saw it, it was gone.
Yes,
absolutely. Well, Maria, you have been nothing short of an amazing guest. Easily one of my favorite conversations I've had in a very long time.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to hang out with us and come on the podcast. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you too. I will say that I regret I didn't have any alligator hunting stories for you guys, because I heard your other guest telling that story and I laughed. And it's especially sad because I lived in Louisiana. We would go out fishing or crabbing or whatever, and catching crabs, and we would be surrounded by alligators, but I never hunted them. I never wrestled them.
There's plenty of time. I mean, if you ever interested in coming back, we'd love to continue, talking about everything.
Yeah, if I do that, I will have to share pictures though, and.
Okay, all right. We could set that up.
That'll work.
Yeah,
well, for everyone listening, please be sure to follow Maria on Twitter at Maria York Author, and to go ahead and give her website a little look to, mariayork.com, so you can see her ebooks that are available.
All the links will be in the description.
Yeah, we'll have all the links set up for you.
And before Cliff wraps it up, is there anything you want to shout out? You obviously have a book coming out, like any dates, anything you want to say before we head out?
That is going to probably be another 6 months or so before that comes out. It's the second in this series of Blind Man's Bluff. The first was Black Butterfly, and this one's going to be a continuation of that. Picks up right where that left off. It's about Napoleonic Wars, and they had a lot of spies on either side of the war. So it deals a lot about espionage and intrigue that existed during the Napoleonic Wars. But that's I haven't quite finished that book. I feel like I've already written the closing scene, but I just don't know it yet. So I'm going to wrap that up and do an edit and get that ebook out hopefully within the year. I really want to give a shout out to you guys. Thank you, Corn, and thank you, Cliff. What you guys do is fantastic. Your platform gives other people a platform too. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Completely our pleasure. Thank you again so much for coming on.
All right, guys. You have a great night.
Okay. You do as well.